And we are live. Welcome, everyone, to another event of the Desert Live series. If this is your first time, Desert Live is a virtual series of storytelling events, panels, and workshops curated to entertain and inform the outdoor community, so you, in relation to Joshua Tree National Park and our public lands. We try to empower our community through genuine connections with the culture, beauty, and issues of the outdoors. And we also ensure that our presenters embody the goals of the program and that they sustain a proven record of supporting diversity and inclusion, environmental efforts, and leave no trace principles. We launched this program last year, 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, and this has all been commissioned by the Desert Institute and the Joshua Tree National Park Association. So thank you to the JTNPA for this great opportunity. Thank you to the Desert Institute for believing in creating accessible and virtual events so folks can be connected even when they cannot be in Joshua Tree National Park. Before we continue, I do want to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have stewarded the land that we're on for time immemorial. For Joshua Tree National Park, I want to acknowledge the Mojave, the Cahuilla, the Serrano, and the Chemehuevi peoples. I am today tuning in from Casa Grande, Arizona, also the land of the Hohokam, Akimel Udam, the Tohono O'odham, and the O'odham Jude peoples. And Sydney, I let you acknowledge where you're tuning in from.
I am tuning in today from Mundelein, Illinois, which is the ancestral land of the Peoria, Kickapoo, and Potawatomi people.
Thank you. This event, like I said, is possible thanks to the support from the Desert Institute. And if you're not familiar, the Desert Institute is a branch of the Joshua Tree National Park Association that's dedicated to bringing educational, cultural, and artistic programs to the field within Joshua Tree National Park and its surrounding areas. Now we also do it virtually, which is awesome because we get to reach new borders, new areas of the world. And we also have replays, so everything that we do is on demand and folks can tune in whenever they are available. I want to go through a little bit of our housekeeping rules. We encourage everyone to be nice in the chat. Any questions will be answered at the end just to avoid confusion during the streaming in case there are delays and things like that. There's an ask a question button where you can click and submit your questions. If we get disconnected, please wait while we're fixing things, but I would say first try to refresh your browser, and we'll be doing troubleshooting in our end if we're having an issue as well. There's also a help button at the top of the chat. So if you have an issue, I highly recommend you click on that button. There's a couple of troubleshooting tips. If you continue to experience problems, just drop a comment in the chat. And that way, if somebody else is experiencing the same problem, we can perhaps stop the presentation and make sure that we can fix everyone's problem. And then again, there will be a replay of the event. So if you're registered, you'll get to see it after if you need a refresher or anything like that. Now, I'm really honored and excited to welcome back to Desert Live Sydney Williams, who was our first guest in the launching iteration of this series last year. Sydney is an outdoors advocate, long-distance hiker, and the author and founder of Hiking My Feelings. Her work explores how trauma manifests in our minds and bodies and how the outdoors can help us heal. When she's on the road or adventuring in the backcountry, you can find her in a cozy spot in the shade of a big tree with a journal in her hand. And she was also, back in the day, a competitive skydiver. And when she found herself on the receiving end of a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, while dealing with some unresolved trauma from a decades-old sexual assault, she set out on a mission to turn her pain into power. She founded Hiking My Feelings, an organization dedicated to help others tap into the mind-body connection and the healing power of nature, which is what helped her kick her self-limiting beliefs and disease into remission. And today, she's going to be telling us in this 1-hour workshop how spending time on the trail intentionally can help improve our mental, physical, spiritual, and community health. So, Sydney, without much further ado, I'll pass over the mic.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabacha. Always a pleasure to be doing some work here with the Joshua Tree National Park Association. So thank you for having me. Tonight, we're going to talk about trail thoughts, what they are, how we use them, and why they're beneficial for our mental, physical, spiritual, and community health as well. So before we jump into that, an excellent introduction by Gabachi, a little bit more context as to who I am and why I'm here. So in addition to being an outdoors advocate, long distance hiker, and the founder and author of Hiking My Feelings, I am also a recovering marketer. My chapter before this chapter of life was working in corporate communications with companies like Fortune 500 companies like the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, Snickers, big name brands, and with some startups as well. And I didn't grow up outdoorsy. I have been hiking since 2011, but backpacking since 2016. And for anybody that's not familiar with my story and how I got connected to the outdoors, the quick version is pretty simple. I went on my first backpacking trip in 2016. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, radically changed my life, and was a great reminder that I can do hard things and that I love my body. And then 9 months later, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I instituted some pretty radical lifestyle changes in order to learn how to manage this disease. But ultimately, the stress of my career, which at the time I was leading email marketing for NBC Universal, a nationwide commercial campaign, and an agency rebrand internally for the marketing firm I was working with, I couldn't get my stress under control. So stress is one of the biggest factors for people living with diabetes. And in order to manage this disease effectively, I just decided to quit my job, no backup plan. 4 days later, I was training for my second attempt at the Trans Catalina Trail, which was the backpacking trip I did in 2016, but did not complete. And I realized at the top of a mountain that instead of eating and drinking my feelings, thanks to this diabetes diagnosis, that I was then hiking my feelings. So what started as an idea on a mountaintop turned into a hashtag and a blog post, and then eventually this community that we're building here, the movement that we lead for mindfulness in the outdoors, a book, a nationwide tour, all kinds of great stuff. And so now we're a nonprofit organization, and we have the distinct pleasure of working with the Joshua Tree National Park Association, as myself as a Desert Institute instructor, and Hiking My Feelings created a track of programming for the Desert Institute that we started instituting last fall called Wilderness Wellness. So we host retreats inside the park at one of the campgrounds that you can only access if you're park staff or signing up for an event like this through the Desert Institute or through Joshua Tree National Park Association. So if you're new to doing courses and classes with this organization, I can't speak highly enough of the programming that they offer here. So a little side plug and shout out to JTNPA for bringing something like this to people. Field institutes are at an all-time high risk of being closed down if they haven't been already. So your support here is greatly appreciated. And it gives us a fun way to share our programming with new audiences. So thank you so much for being here. What is Hiking My Feelings now? It's a nonprofit organization. We lead a initiative currently called Take a Hike Diabetes, where we're introducing people to the healing power of nature. And part of our programming that we do virtually as part of our 12-week program called Blaze Your Own Trail to Self-Love, and in person at our retreats and the hikes that we do around the US, is this concept of trail thoughts. So tonight I thought I would walk you through what it is, how we use it, how it's benefited me and helped me connect the dots on a lot of things in my life, and why you might want to pick this up as a practice for yourself. And then we'll actually go through a virtual version of what we would do if we were on the trail. So I'll walk you through how you can start implementing this ritual and practice into your life on and off the trail. So to get things started, and for anybody that's catching this as a replay, we do have worksheets available. And for anybody that's watching live, everything that I say is basically verbatim going to be listed on the worksheet. So don't worry so much about taking notes. If you hear something that sticks out, definitely jot it down. But you will be receiving the worksheets that accompany the words that are coming out of my mouth for this workshop. So if you get distracted by writing notes, don't worry. Everything that I'm about to say will already be written down for you. So at the root of everything we do at Hiking My Feelings is this simple belief that we believe that hiking is an opportunity to come home to yourself, build self-trust, and get connected with the land. I really appreciate Joshua Tree National Park Association and Gabacha in particular with her work through Exploring Responsibly for educating about land acknowledgements and understanding the indigenous cultures that came here before colonization and before these park systems even existed. So we'll talk through what it means to come home to yourself, how to build self-trust and get connected with the land. And we'll talk about the difference between trail thoughts and trail talk, because we have two different ways that we do this. And then we'll walk through the process. So for coming home to yourself, the ways that we can do this through hiking and time spent in nature. A couple disclaimers too. We aren't particular about what we consider a hike to be in the context of the work that we're doing this year outside of the National Park Service. We're really just not trying to gatekeep what a hike is. So if you hike, awesome. If you walk, if you roll, if you're in a wheelchair, if you jog, if you ruck, if you trail run, if you do regular road running, no matter what the activity is, we say hiking because that's our preferred method of getting out there. But the real common denominator that we found across people in all kinds of outdoor activities is that where this kind of work is most effective and where you can find deep peace and growth and self-understanding is when you are able to disconnect from the distractions and reconnect with yourself. So no podcasts, no music, no audiobooks, just being fully embraced by the world around you and hearing what your thoughts may bring up as they would in a normal seated meditation, or the world around you, just being aware of your surroundings without the distractions of everyday life. So that's the key theme through all of the work that we do, is trying to get people, whether you're sitting at home and doing the meditation that we'll share with you later, to remind yourself of what it's like to spend time outside, because I recognize I carry a lot of privilege in that I've created a career out of this, and I can be outside whenever I want. I know that's not the case for everybody. So one of the exercises that we'll do out in the field is to really soak up the surroundings that we're in when we feel so good out in nature in the middle of nowhere, and really dig into our senses to be able to recall those memories when we're feeling stressed out in our little boxes, whether that's your house or your car or your office, or other indoor spaces that might make you anxious sometimes. So really being able to just drop in and tune in. And the best way to do that is to remove the distractions. So it's the first part being coming home to yourself. The best way to open that up is to just remove as many distractions as you can. And that's why we like doing this out in nature, on a walk, in motion. So second component of like just our hiking ethos is that you can build self-trust. And one of the best stories I have is a description and demonstration of how to do this in the easiest way that I'm sure we can all relate to. One of our program participants and now program facilitators for Blaze Your Own Trail to Self-Love, Cassie, mentioned that one of her tips from her therapist about how to build self-trust was very simple. If you have to pee, go pee. And it sounds silly, but especially for myself, I can definitely relate to this. We live and travel in our van. I treat every bathroom as an opportunity, which sounds kind of silly, but when you're on the road and you're not like, before you go to bed at night and you don't have a toilet anywhere that you can go to the restroom, you take that opportunity. And when you neglect yourself on something as basic as going to the bathroom, which is a totally normal bodily function, over the course of my life, like on road trips, it was inconvenient because we had to pee all the time, and that like made my parents upset, right? Like it's delaying the trip. On a date in the wilderness, whatever, like if you're in the groove and you're just like, no, hold it, it's fine. That's changing that around and just being like, and honoring that you feel like you have to pee is one of the best ways to start building trust with your body. And so I always like to give that as an example. But in the grander scale of doing things in your life and areas outside of hiking, and really just integrating this in all the different components that make up this wonderful human experience that we're living, is to just take one step every day that gets you closer to your goal. So whatever your goal is, and we'll talk about intention setting and goal setting and stuff as it pertains to this practice with hiking. But just in general, like the idea that healing is some mountain that you can summit, and once you get to the top, then you're good to go. the summit of Healed Mountain doesn't exist. So it's nice to look at this journey that we're on, break it down into digestible steps. And for me, that's literally one step at a time, one step per day that gets us closer to whatever that goal is. So when we're thinking about stuff like that, I also want to make sure to call out that rest is a step that you can take. And I have experienced this firsthand today. So in the preparation of our campaign this year, we've been in a sprint since September all the way through March, and just basically working nonstop. Hiking My Feelings is currently myself and my husband, and we have 2 board members who are absolutely fantastic as well. But my husband and I are doing all the work, and we just go, 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 go. And this morning I was like, you know what? It's Friday. It's a long weekend. It's the first nice weather weekend that we've had, especially in most parts of the country, especially since the pandemic. So Memorial Day weekend is always kind of like a get outside and go do something kind of weekend. And I was just thinking, like, everybody that I need to talk to today is already on vacation. So there's like, the whole world is not going to melt down if I take a day for myself. So we woke up, had some breakfast, went back to bed, and I woke up and it was 1:30 in the afternoon. I haven't slept in like that since I was a child, and certainly not on a Friday. So for me, I like to talk about how rest is a step you can take, selfishly to remind myself, but also just to give you full permission to know that you don't have to be taking big monster life-changing steps every day. It can be as simple as deciding to rest. And the interesting part about that, and where I'll leave us on the idea of building self-trust, is to reinforce this for myself. I had a deliverable for a project that I was just kind of struggling to pull together, and I was forcing myself to try to do it earlier this week, and I had a little bit of writer's block and I couldn't get it done. But after my big long nap this morning, I got out my computer and I just typed it up, and it just flowed right out of me. So if you ever find yourself finding resistance for a creative project or a work project, or you're trying to think about how to start a difficult conversation with somebody that's important to you in your life, whatever the situation may be, to be able to take a step back, go rest, and then come back to it refreshed can really shift your perspective and open things up as far as how you're able to process goes. And that's true for on the trail as well. So when it comes to hiking, we talk about no hiker left behind. I usually lead up the front. Barry, my husband, usually pulls up the rear on our hikes to make sure that nobody gets lost. And taking rest when you need it is 100% like one of the most important parts of hiking, especially if you're going to start doing hiking and meditating and hiking and processing. The physical endeavor of hiking can be exhausting in and of itself, and the mental endeavor that you might embark on when starting to dig into this work can also be very, very soul filling, but also deeply tiring. So permission granted to take a rest day if you need it, or to take an extra break. And if you feel weird about taking a break because you don't want to hold up the group, I'm also one of those people. Just say you're taking pictures and take some time to breathe. So the last one, getting connected to the land. So I'll share some resources at the end of the presentation about a meditation called Sense of Place. And this was first facilitated for me by a woman named Emily Isaacs. She's a wilderness therapist based in Golden, Colorado. And Sense of Place basically teaches you how to tap into your current surroundings. So this is really fun to do when we're out in the middle of Joshua Tree. We'll hike from the campground over to this beautiful set of rocks. And by beautiful set of rocks, I mean like ginormous Joshua Tree rocks. But we'll traverse across the desert and go find a place to sit, and then just look out at the expansive wilderness and really tap into what's happening in that moment, so we can then bring that memory home. But you can also do this in your chair where you're sitting tonight, or today if you're watching the replay, and really just give yourself the opportunity to take a deep breath. And one of the things that unites the Hiking My Feelings community, and I hope keeps you in it now that you're part of it, is that we're coming to realize, I think as a society, but definitely within our community and within this organization, that self-care isn't selfish. And in fact, it is deeply, deeply necessary. Self-care has kind of been pink washed a little bit. So it's like candles and bubble bath and like go get your nails done. And all of those things are definitely beautiful tools for self-care. But there's something really special about creating time and space for yourself that is on purpose, but doesn't have to be frilly. Because if your entire self-care ritual is dependent upon having material things versus what you can do for yourself, then if you don't have those things, you might not feel like you can do something with self-care. This requires literally nothing except for your time and your brain and your energy. So other ways that you can get connected to the land, the sense of place meditation, also doing research about the indigenous folks that came here before us. Native-land.ca is a great place to start that research. If you're unfamiliar with that tool, it's a website, and they also have an app where you can go type in your address or just your city, state, and it does a map overlay of all the different territories for indigenous folks that have occupied this land since time immemorial. Like Gabachi mentioned at the beginning, there have been humans on this planet for thousands of years before we got to this beautiful country that is America. So and it's not so much, it's definitely a thing of respect for the culture itself, that first and foremost, that's why we should do it. But also I found that it's a beautiful layer of understanding and visualizing that can go on top of the exercises that we're doing in a trail thought kind of scenario, to do a little bit of research ahead of time on a hike, understand who lived there, how they lived off the land, and how they use the different tools and what was around them, can really help you connect to the spaces where you're recreating in a really beautiful way. To be able to identify plants and animals, to take a naturalist training, to do this research about the indigenous folks that lived here, are all ways that you can feel more connected to the space where you're recreating, which my secret ulterior motive is to introduce people to places where healing is possible. And then if they're anything like me, they become fiercely protective of that land for themselves and future generations. So everything we do has a little bit of an undercurrent of conservation and stewardship. So we facilitate these experiences virtually, like I mentioned, through our Blaze Your Own Trail to Self-Love program, where each week you get a trail thought for your hike of the week, to integrate the lessons learned in that module of the program and then bring them out onto the trail so you can process. And then we also do these things in person as well. So a couple things. First one, so for trail thoughts, we consider this as like the self-reflection exercise. So you could be doing a hike by yourself, or maybe you're not by yourself, but you're doing this ritual for yourself by yourself, and you're not like bringing it out into the world. You're just kind of like thinking about your trail thought and maybe taking some notes for yourself. So those are trail thoughts. Start this conversation with yourself. And then we also call like a group version of this trail talk. So not everybody feels comfortable hiking solo. Not everybody has the opportunity to do so. Or some people just really like hiking and talking and, being in a community with other people on the trail. And if that's the case, the questions that we offer as trail thoughts in our programs are great conversation starters too. So like when we think about how we go about going through this process, if you're going for a hike by yourself, or if you're in a group of people, but you're the only one that's planning to participate in this kind of ritual, then just have this thought at the beginning of the hike, and we'll walk through the process and use the hike as a meditation. So similar to what we would do in a seated meditation, if your brain starts to get squirrely, a lot of guided meditation instructors will say to return to your breath. And in this way, if we're moving and, in motion, and for me, I love processing in motion because I feel like when I'm moving, my energy is too, and my thoughts don't get stuck in my head in this spiral. There is a beautiful just way of sitting with this with yourself. So have that conversation with yourself and go from there. And then if you're in a group, what we say is like share the trail thought with everybody. And for the first however many miles or however many hours or a distance or a specific spot that you're stopping on the trail to reflect, like have that first section just be kind of solo, where you're thinking about what it means for yourself, and then come together as a community to discuss. So groups, trail talk, groups, or single people, trail thoughts. So to walk through the process, first and foremost, prepare for your hike. So if you already have a hike in mind, awesome. If you don't, do some research, however you go about doing your research for trails. Bring your 10 essentials. Make sure you have plenty of water. Make sure you've researched the wildlife that's in the area and you feel comfortable handling that. And all the things that you would normally do to prepare for a hike. This is just a layer on top of whatever prep you already do. So in addition to your 10 essentials, some supplies that you might want is a trail journal and a pen. So trail journals, we have one. It's like a little 3x5 moleskin notebook that it can tuck in your pocket. It can tuck in like the outside pocket of your backpack, and then you're not wasting phone battery going through that. But also the notes section on your phone can work fine too. And then the first step that you want to do either before you leave, so before you get to the trailhead, or once you've stretched out and you are there and you're getting ready to start your hike, is write an intention for your hike. So is this a hike for training and fitness, or is this a hike where you've just got some stuff going on and you want to go stomp it out on the trail? That's awesome too. If there's something that you want to release or something that you're trying to manifest, like this is a great time to call those things in or to let those go. And for some of us, like we just feel called to go outside and we're not sure why. And for me, the second hike that I did that ended up turning into all the things for hiking my feelings across Catalina Island, in advance of that hike, I didn't have really any expectations. I understood that I had started hiking my feelings instead of eating and drinking them before that hike, like 2 weeks before that hike. But I didn't know what that meant yet. So I just went in with an open mind and I was like, if there's anything that is good for me to release, let's see what that is. If there's stuff that I still need to process, I'm open to that coming up. And I just really set the stage for trusting myself and knowing that I could handle whatever came my way. So when we think about how to start this journey, writing out an intention for one particular hike. Now, whether that's a backpacking trip and it's like the goal of the trip, or it's like your Saturday hike, set an intention and then allow that to align with everything you've got going on and just kind of follow the flow of what happens. I like to say, when we do stuff like this, when we set big goals, when we dream big dreams, if we're clear on what we're doing and why, and in the case of hiking and trail thoughts and hiking my feelings, what are we doing? We're moving our bodies. Why? To improve our health, to improve our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health. And as a community, we can all improve our health as well. So get clear on what you want to do, why you want to do it. And then the how and the who, like how will it happen and who will help you get there when it comes to these goals. Just kind of like throw that up to God, universe, unicorns, whatever you believe in, because the what and the why is the part that's like really important for the formula of like getting to the point where you're achieving your goals and making these big steps towards the next chapter or next epic adventure in your life. So get clear on what and why, leave the who and how to the big guys. So once you start your hike, again, if you're starting with a group, share the trail thought, spread that around, think about it for yourself for the first however many miles or however much time, and then share as a group. And if it's for yourself, then just chill and go into it. So when you're ready to go, like start hiking, consider this question. And so I keep saying these trail thoughts, these questions. We put out trail thoughts for our programs. We put out trail thoughts starting, this is like kind of a spoiler alert, but starting next week on Thursday when the virtual campfire, which is our podcast, returns. We share a trail thought on Thursday to like get you psyched for the weekend. And then we talk about it on Friday in our newsletter and all this stuff. So like have this thought. You can come get them from us. You can Google journal prompts for whatever it is that you're working through. There's so many great resources out there for mindfulness and self-reflection. Whether you get it from us or from somebody else, we don't care. It's all good. The fact that you're thinking about doing this is what we're psyched about. So when you're ready to go, consider the question before we start hiking. And then, so this will be your guiding question as you hike. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're in a seated meditation and your brain starts getting squirrely, they tell you to return to your breath. So if you're walking and things start getting squirrely, you can return to this question. So for example, the first question in our Blaze Your Own Trail to Self-Love program, and one that we can use for the sake of this weekend, if you're hiking this weekend, is what inspires me. So when you start thinking about like how your relationships are like the different things that might be like weighing you down, whether it's a relationship or your job or your kids or whatever the pressures of life, COVID, why are we reopening? What's happening? Anything that's kind of weighing you down, when your brain starts to spiral on that, you can just come back to, okay, what inspires me? What inspires me? And the cool thing about going through this process, first and foremost, is like, if you find your mind wandering a lot, you can make note of what it's wandering to. So I like to think of us as all of us, we're all just kind of like scientists and we're just collecting data. So as we're hiking, if we're thinking about what inspires me and then it always goes somewhere else, write that down, because that could be a helpful tip or trick about something that might need some healing or something that requires your attention. Because what happens is when we shut off all of the distractions, when we're not checking email, when we're not checking social media, when we're not listening to podcasts and audiobooks and everything else, when it's just us and nature, a lot of thoughts can come up and make themselves known, and you can actually have the time to hear it because you're not distracting yourself from other things. So if and when your brain starts going whoo, like all over the place, that is totally expected, completely normal, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's just more opportunities to learn more about yourself in some areas where you might want to focus your attention. So like make notes. And then when you've done that, like after you, because if you're hiking, you're like, what inspires me? Your brain goes right, your brain goes left, you make your notes, and then you come back, you're like, okay, what inspires me? And when that happens, as you use this trail thought as your baseline, a couple things you can identify. One, if you're able to focus on what inspires you, then you'll learn something about yourself. So that's great. And if you get distracted, when you make notes about what distracted you from your inspiration, is another point to consider. And if this repeats itself and you have a record of it, which you're doing when you make these notes, then you can start to dig deeper into what those categories are and ask yourself, like, why does this keep coming up? So that's kind of the process of the trail thought while you're walking. So you're thinking, you're just kind of observing your surroundings as you're moving. And then what we like to do is we'll find a spot, whether that's a spot where people are starting to get tired, so we should just take a seat and let everybody recoup. Maybe it's a break for a snack if like my blood sugar is feeling low, or if we're just hungry, or maybe it's a turnaround point if it's like an out and back kind of hike. But find a quiet space and get comfortable. And then we'll start to talk about the sense of place meditation and all of that fun stuff. So does anybody have any questions yet so far? If you do, go ahead and pop them in the chat.
I think we're clear of questions at this time, Sydney. Thanks
Perfect.
for checking.
Awesome. Then, so for the sense of place meditation, and I'll be sure to circulate this as a resource for you after the presentation. But one of the things that really drew me to this was the idea that I could do this anywhere. It didn't have to only be in nature, but the benefit of doing it in nature and the benefit of finding a place where you can observe the world around you, like the same place. There's something really special about that. And so what I mean by that is this is a ritual that you can do on any hike you go on ever. And also it's something that's like really cool to do, like from your backyard or your favorite neighborhood park or whatever the case may be. And the reason that I really like this connecting to one particular place, in addition to like becoming aware of your surroundings on any hike you do, this sense of place meditation where you do it in the same place over the course of the year really inspires me. And I didn't have an opportunity to understand what that was or how to do it, or even pay attention to some of the things that are brought up during this meditation until last year during the pandemic. So we travel 6-9 months out of the year when it's not in lockdown. And so last year was the first year where we had an entire year, January to December, at the place where we park when we're not on the road, which is out in Julian, California, about 45 minutes east of San Diego, up in the Cuyamaca Mountains. When we were there at the top, so we live on, our friends have 9 acres out in the mountains. And where we live, we're like kind of down on the slope of the mountain, and you can go up and over this hill on the property. And so we're in the winter time, the sun sets over the city of San Diego. So you go up and over the mountain and you sit up top on the rocks and you can watch the sunset like over downtown San Diego. You can see the buildings and everything from where we are. And as the year goes, the sun shifts, and then you can't see the sunset from up on top of the mountain anymore, but you can see it from the moon tower. So then it shifts and it starts setting at like San Diego over by Cabrillo National Monument, which is one of the most southernmost tips of the San Diego Bay Area. And then over the course of the year, it goes all the way up and starts setting over like Carlsbad Oceanside, so North County, San Diego. And I am a sucker for a sunset. In fact, where I'm sitting tonight at my friend Adam's mom's house, Adam used to say you only get so many sunsets. And so tonight is full circle for that reason. But two, to be able to sit in a place long enough over a long enough in one sitting, but over the course of a period of time as well, and be able to notice those differences, not only where the sun is setting, but like where is the wind coming from? And that's from a time of day perspective. That's from a seasonal perspective. Um, if you're lucky enough to live in a dark sky community or dark-ish sky community, like can you see the stars? Can you see the Milky Way? Like what's going on in the sky? What kind of animals are passing through? Like what animals live here all the time? What animals migrate through this area? I recently got into birding and I'm not very good at it yet, but like it's so cool to pay attention to all the different kinds of birds that come through one place as well. Um, and it's like, what can you hear? So identifying, like, I kind of think about it like peeling back layers of the onion. It's like peeling back layers of sound, where I used to really punish myself during meditations for not being able to stay focused and have this clear mind that was empty and free. Um, I really started leaning into identifying all of the things that I can hear. Like that is in itself its own form of meditation. So I was like, okay, layers of sound. Well, when I was living in a house, I could hear our air conditioning unit. I could hear our dog's paws tapping on the ground. I could hear like the tippy tappy of computer keyboards, the airplanes that would fly overhead, the birds that were outside the window, whatever music my husband had on, whatever phone conversations he was having. And instead of like punishing myself for not being in a totally silent meditation center, I was like celebrating one that I could hear. Like to have the ability to hear is a beautiful part of the human experience, but also to be able to identify all the different layers of sound was its own meditation in and of itself. So also thinking about what you can see, the gift of sight is another beautiful ability to have. So what are the flowers you can see? What's this tree? Like if there's a park near your house, like go sit under a tree and like, what is the tree like? What is the bark like? What's the life cycle of the leaves? Do they turn colors? If so, when? There's so many different layers that you can find. And through something like a Joshua Tree National Park Association class about like plant and animal identification, or your local city park might have something about the like planting trees and all that kind of stuff. Like there are endless ways to just kind of add these layers of experience and really tap into what is happening in the present moment, instead of thinking about all the things that can go wrong or the way the world is or whatever else might be distracting you. So don't punish yourself if your brain tends to wander. It's a really beautiful opportunity to take note and be grateful for all the abilities that you do have. Because if you can see and smell and hear and taste and feel the wind, like it's a pretty good day to be alive. So that's kind of the sense of place meditation. I will be sure to send out a resource around that too, so you have that for yourself. And then finish your hike safely and with enthusiasm. So if that's your turnaround point, then you can still return to that trail thought. If you're with a group, great time to discuss it. On the back half of a hike, I usually start thinking about food. So you can also be thinking about where you're going to go eat or what you have to do for the rest of the day. But just because the hike is halfway over doesn't mean it's all the way over. And most accidents tend to happen on the back half of a hike as we're getting closer to the car and we're like ready to be done. So just take your time, enjoy the experience. The trail's not going anywhere, and you can come back whenever you want. So definitely pay attention to where you're putting your feet at the end of these things, and just be so excited and so grateful that you get to do this. So that is kind of the flow of a hike. So you start with an intention, you have a trail thought, you think about what you're thinking about as you're walking. If your brain starts to wander, make note of where it wanders to, so then you can get back to that later. And then you do your meditation when you sit down, maybe journal, maybe draw some of the stuff. Another cool way to get like out of your head and back into your body is to like pick something in nature and just draw it. You don't have to be good at it. I am not a talented artist, but it's really fun to like find a sage bush and like draw a sage leaf, right? So once you've done that, you go home, you do whatever you do. I really, really encourage you to not only let the reflection happen when you're on the trail. Some of the most incredible insights that I've learned about myself and my life and the world around me have happened after the hike is over. So whatever that means for you, for me, the questions that I share in our trail journal and as part of our programs are the questions that I asked myself on the Trans Catalina Trail every day that I was on the trail. And the reason that I asked these questions was to jog my memory. One, to like, I'm aware of the questions before I go out on the trail. Like I am already aware of what I want to write down when I get back. So I know that I'm going to be thinking about, like my statistics on the trail. So what's the trail name, distance, elevation gain, like get down your bragging rights, right? And then think about like, okay, what were my biggest wins on this trail? What lessons did I learn? What am I thankful for right now? What am I feeling right now? What did I see and hear? Did anything stand out? Did I use any mantras? And these questions, while they in combination with the stuff where you're really digging into your senses, does a couple of great things. One, it keeps us super present. And two, having an awareness of these things also keeps your mind from getting too squirrely and focusing and starting to like reframe and redirect and even like rebuild some of the pathways in your brain to think about these things that you might not otherwise think about on a hike. Like before I went on that hike across Catalina, I wasn't thinking about my biggest wins on a hike. I was thinking about how much it sucked and how much like I was so sweaty and I was so slow and I, all the things that I was not good at and how I wanted to be better at hiking. I don't know how you get better at hiking, but you know what I mean? And my mindset was frankly just kind of negative. And so to have this set of questions, knowing that I'm going to reflect on this when I get home, one, gives me the opportunity to seek out the good and the positive and the insights that can come from a hike. So that's number one. And then number two, it is just a beautiful way to reconnect the dots between some of the thoughts that came up and where you were. So I don't know if anybody's planning on writing a book. If you are, this is a great way to go about it. But the only reason that I can remember as much from my hike across Catalina Island as I can is because of things like this, where I was sitting down, really taking in my surroundings in the moment. And then when I got down to camp every night, after I was laying in my tent, I was like, okay, here's my big wins. Here's what I remember from the day. Here's what stood out to me. And then I'm doing like my wildlife count. So when it comes back to connecting the dots between the things that took your brain away from the trail thought and where you were and what you were feeling in your body, then you kind of have some data to work with. Like if every time you started thinking about the things that inspire you, you were thinking about a conversation you had with somebody that just didn't feel right, then that's evidence that that is taking up some space in your brain and your body, and you should do something to release it. And first things first is to acknowledge it. And that's part of what this process can help you do. So the questions that we answer in our trail journals. So at the end of a hike like this, you would have your intention for the hike itself, your notes about your surroundings while you're doing this meditation. So like you're thinking about, and you can use the meditation that I'm going to send and like save that and have that queued up. Or you can just know, okay, I'm going to scan my senses while I'm out in nature. And then if you want to take notes when you're done with that, do that. Because what I found is when you get really present and you're seated and you're reflecting, like it kind of can open up just like a wave of stuff. So I tend to free write after I go through the meditation because I'm already kind of in that zone and feeling open and feeling great. And sometimes I'm crying, sometimes I'm laughing, sometimes it's something in between. But to write and just kind of free write after the meditation, that's awesome too. And then when you get home or when you get to camp, if it's a backpacking trip, whatever the cadence may be, then those final questions where you're really digging into like, what did I experience on the trail? How did this come up for me and stuff like that? So those are trail thoughts in general. And this is a ritual that you can do for yourself on a hike. You can do it in a group on a hike. You can do it on the subway. Like you can do these meditations and kind of like check in with yourself anytime that you start getting kind of squirrely or stressed out. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, thank you.
No, thank you so much for that, Sydney. I am a personal user of the trail thoughts, so that's why I kind of instigated this particular workshop and chat with you. I'm curious, honestly, to hear from any success stories from your community that have like resounded big with the use of trail thoughts.
Well, I will say, I don't know if it's directly related to trail thoughts, but when I think about the one of the most impressive stories of just like transformation and deep understanding of self within our community is from a woman named Michelle. And she has been public with her story and how this work has changed her. So I feel comfortable sharing that when she originally reached out to us, she was interested in our retreat. She self-identified as a victim of sexual assault. And that's one of the communities that we're deeply passionate about serving with this wilderness wellness programming. Everything we do at Hiking My Feelings is great for everybody, but I know for a fact that it works for a few different communities. So survivors of trauma in particular, it can just be so scary to be in your body after having it violated in that way. And to have a way to get back into your body when it starts to like get kind of weird has been really crucial for my development, and then reinforced by Michelle's as well. So she went through our summer program last year. She's been a big part of the virtual campfire community, and she attended our in-person retreat in March earlier this year on Catalina Island. And I'll never forget her coming up the final like stretch to get to the summit, which is like one of the highest parts of Catalina Island. And we didn't assign mantras for anybody or assign a trail question, but we introduced the concept. And as she was coming up, she's like, if I can beat cancer, I can do this. And then she just like marched up to the top of the mountain, and she was just like sobbing, and I was crying. And it was just like, it was really cool because like we hadn't said, now here's your thought, go think it. We introduced the concept of trail thoughts, and she took it and ran with it. And it was so like, it's really cool to see this work happen virtually, but in life, in person, like it's one of my favorite things that I'm looking forward to this fall with regards to the retreats that we're hosting at Joshua Tree this fall, is to be able to see this happen for people in person again. Cause it's wonderful for me because I'm like, oh, thank God I'm not the only person that's found healing outside. Like, I know I'm not the only person, and I know I'm not the first, but it's always just so validating to see other people have this experience, and to introduce people who have never even, like, I think we all, if you like spending time outside, I think we know that there's something going on, but we might not have the language to articulate why we're so compelled to spend time outdoors. And so this is one of those ways where it's like, oh, I get it. Okay, yeah, like I just shouted this one sentence, and now everything feels like it's possible. And it's really fun to watch that happen for people.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And
yeah, thank you. Question.
Thank you, Michelle, for letting you share that as well. What's your favorite mantra for the trail? Do you have one?
Yes. And I wrote down a bunch because I'm getting ready to share some as a function of this. So I'm going to pull it up. It's great. I love that you asked that. So my favorite, I've got so many. And the thing is one of the best parts about this particular exercise is it could be a question, it could be an affirmation, it could just be a single word. So like my first hike across Catalina in 2016, all I said was right foot, left foot. And that carried over into every aspect of my life. Cause like backpacking and hiking in general are pretty great metaphors for, you know, like you can't give up, right? Like the trail's not going to get any shorter. The days aren't going to get any longer. You just got to keep going. And so for me, the one that is really just kind of carried me through is like, is this concept of like just right foot, left foot, doing it one step at a time. Because when I'm on a hike and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired of hiking, I just want this to be over. I think to myself, I'm like, okay, well, if that was my marriage, would I just like want this to be over, or would I keep going and work at it? If this was hiking my feelings and like somebody threw a wrench in my plans, like, am I going to be like, okay, it's over, or am I going to keep working through it? So right foot, left foot is a really powerful one for me. And then we have a bunch of different like questions that really get your brain ticking too. My favorite of those right now is, if this is possible, what else is possible? Because what I've found, and another iteration of that is if you're doing like some pretty deep personal growth and you realize that you've been telling yourself a couple lies for all of your life. Once you identify one lie, again, like peeling back the onion, if this is a lie, what else is a lie? So that kind of like, if it's possible, what else is possible on the positive side of things? Like if it's possible that I can sit here and talk with Gabacha on a Friday night live on the internet, talking about trail thoughts, like what else is possible? Right. Or if it's like, man, I have been talking so poorly to myself, and here's one of these things that I said that is just definitely not true. Okay, if that's a lie, what else is a lie? So those are a couple of my favorites right now. Yeah.
Oh, I love that because that just has so many applications, like you said, and that's powerful. So that's the question. I really like this idea of the right foot, left foot. Where does that come from, or how did you arrive there?
Barry just told me that, like, because the first time I did the Trans-Catalina Trail in 2016, for anybody that's not familiar, it's off the coast of Los Angeles, 38 miles across the island. And the first day you're going up and down 5 peaks, and your backpack's the heaviest it's ever going to be. It's the hardest day of the hike. The elevation gain's bananas, and it's just exhausting. And I was in the worst shape of my life, and I basically rolled off the couch and onto the trail. And I just I wanted to temper tantrum like a toddler so many times. And Barry was like, Sydney, right foot, left foot. Like when it gets hard, if the only thing that you can think about, if you can just dumb it all the way down and simplify it to one phrase and one decision, is like, decide to pick up your right foot, decide to pick up your left foot, and just keep going. And it translates to everything. Like I said earlier, like it's so good. So I don't know if I don't know that Barry invented that, but I'll give him credit for it.
Cool. Well, maybe someday we can instigate with Barry and see where he got that from. Well, thank you so much, Sydney. I think that was super helpful. I hope that folks, if you notice on the chat, I dropped the link to download the companion workbook to this talk so that you have some trail thoughts to take with you and the step-by-step and everything there. I also dropped the link to the Take a Hike Diabetes campaign because you can join Sydney and Hiking My Feelings in their goal of hiking a community goal of 1 million miles. And then I also dropped the link to nativeland.ca so you can start looking into the Indigenous and First Nations that have stewarded the lands that we today call our playgrounds, right? Yes. So thank you, Sydney, for all the resources. Is there anything else? Any final words? Any final shares that you have for the community?
I am dropping the sense of place link in the chat, so they have that. Perfect. And then the only other thing that I would say is at any point, so Hiking My Feelings, we talk a lot about some heavy stuff like trauma and death and like all kinds of things. And what I encourage people to do, like mindfulness is like deeply rooted in the work we do. In the first few pages of my book, I encourage people to take a note in the margins if any part of my story triggers you. So if the story is about sexual assault or suicide or cancer or whatever, all these really serious things that are shared experiences among lots of us, right. If my story brings up something in you, like make a note about that. So identify first, like, what am I feeling? And then I ask myself, where do I feel this in my body? And like figure out like what the sensation is. Like for me, when I feel anxious, it feels like an elephant is sitting on my chest. When I feel nervous about like a presentation or something, like my palms might sweat a little bit, and I get like a little like knot in my stomach. So identify what you're feeling, where you feel it in your body. And then similar to the other like breadcrumbs we're leaving for ourselves with the trail thoughts and how our brains might get distracted, ask yourself if you felt this feeling before, and if so, what caused the feeling last time. Because dropping these breadcrumbs, connecting these dots can only happen looking backward. And so giving yourself the time and space to really sit with the feeling, one, can help you become more present, especially for folks that might not feel safe in their bodies or comfortable in their bodies. This gives a really nice pause to just be mindful and appreciate, but also can help you connect the dots on other areas where you might need help or healing. So don't be afraid to feel the feelings, and don't be afraid to identify where they are coming from or where they manifest in your body, because your body's just here to help you. Like your body is your best friend that wants to give you like all the tips and tricks that we don't necessarily have language for, but what we feel and where we feel it, and how those different emotions and experiences manifest in our mind and body can be a really big treasure map when it comes to areas that might need some healing. So.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I think that is so underrated in our culture, right? Like sitting with our feelings and just feeling them, just observing them.
Yeah.
And not really judging. Yeah, there's no judgment. It's just sitting and observing.
What they are.
What's going on? Because a lot of it is, a lot of it, like you said, it's like it's in the past, right? It's things that already happened.
Yeah, we
and
can't change it. Might as
you
well
can't
acknowledge
change
it
it. So might as
and
well be
process it.
present with it and
Yeah,
deal with it and move forward. So thank you so
100%.
much for that reminder. I'm dropping in some other stuff on the chat for everyone in case you want to sign up to future events, in case you want to donate to Joshua Tree. In case you want to follow us on Instagram, you can follow at JT Desert Institute. It's a newer Instagram account, so we're still growing it, but that's the one that's going to be dedicated to all the educational programming. So if you want to see more of these events or more of the other field events that also Hiking My Feelings is going to be hosting later this year, I think the catalog, it's coming out in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned. You can also catch the replays of some of our previous live events on the YouTube channel. So that's there. And you will also receive a link to the recording in your email if you already signed up. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Sydney. Thank you, the Desert Institute and the Joshua Tree National Park Association. I'm Gabachia, your Desert Life host. And this was Trail Thoughts. I hope you all learned something and stay in touch. Bye.
Thank you.